what we all generally know about the human body is that we have bacteria in our gut, right? Like, you don't need to be a medical professional to have found that sort of understand. Even those like Activia commercials we used to see in the 2000s, right? Like, eat your Activia and you'll have the best gut bacteria. We know that there's bacteria in our bodies. We genuinely know that they're in our guts. But we used to think that the uterus did not have bacteria. However, within the last decade, they've actually discovered that that's not true. And research confirms that there's actually a microbiome in the uterus similar to the microbiome that we have in our gut. And when I say microbiome, I basically just mean a bunch of different bacteria that are supposed to be there when we have a healthy microbiome. These are the bacteria and the ratios of bacteria that we want. When we have a dysbiotic microbiome, we are now having overgrowth of bacteria that maybe are there natively, they're supposed to be there, but in smaller amounts, or we're having overgrowth of bad bacteria that shouldn't be there. The balance of your own unique microbiome is what can impact positively or negatively your fertility journey. So we care about this because what research is starting to uncover is when our microbiome is dysbiotic or imbalanced, we are seeing more inflammation in the uterine lining, in the endometrium. We are seeing recurrent implantation failure, and we are seeing recurrent miscarriage. We don't want these things, right? We want babies. We don't want suffering. We don't want loss. We don't want reasons to be blocking a perfectly good embryo from doing its job. And especially looking and digging into how, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, how the microbiome impacts the embryo's ability to implant is super fascinating. Preparing for this episode and just doing a bit more research actually made me think, oh my goodness, this is 10 times more important than I ever thought it was. So if you're sitting there going, I'm doing everything I can, I'm doing all the things and nothing's working, this might be an area to navigate and investigate and ask questions around. Some of the research does show us that 10 to 30%, we don't have great data here, obviously, of women who are dealing with infertility also have chronic endometritis. So endometritis is basically when you have a uterine lining microbiome inflammatory issue. Very, very underdiagnosed in the fertility space. Why? Because it's likely not being assessed for until you're deep into failed IVF. 30 to 60% of women with recurrent implantation failure in IVF cycles have been diagnosed, well, in this one study, I shouldn't say all, were diagnosed with chronic endometritis. That's potentially half of women that were having non-successful euploid embryo transfers, having them not work, were actually then found out to have microbiome issues. 66% of women in this one paper who had recurrent pregnancy loss also had microbiome issues. These numbers are huge, which is why I sit here and I say, we don't need to wait to do assessment. We don't need to have failed IVF to deserve to look into this as a potential option as to why it's not working for you. Oftentimes, when we're talking about microbiome issues or chronic endometritis, there are no symptoms. The symptom is infertility or miscarriage. There isn't pain, swelling, those types of things that are like alarm bells, something's wrong. It's silent, right? The only thing I will say is that this is something when someone has a lot of spotting and nothing else is coming up, we know there's no fibroids or cysts or polyps or anything.